Welcome, everyone, to episode 20 of In the Hot Seat. For those repeat viewers on, thank you very much for joining us again. And for those of you new to the show, every 2 weeks, we put industry experts and our customers in the hot seat for a lively discussion, debate, even some discourse as we humanize the digital experience. All aspects of the customer lifecycle are up for discussion, as well as the technologies that are used throughout each phase of the journey. And just a note, actually any of the live viewers, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, if you're having issues with your stream, you could easily switch to one of the others. We had some issues with LinkedIn recycling, and so unless you just wanted to watch a 4-minute loop of us, you probably want to try one of the other streams. Anyway, but that's the fourth episode. This is a new series we started a little while ago, 8-part series on the impact of organizational culture on customer experience. And today's show, I'm really excited about because this is a little different format for us. It dives into the understanding if geography has an impact on customer experience. And so because of that, we brought together the 7 top voices and leaders from around the world to see what we could learn about that impact of geography on customer experience.
And Michael, when you say around the world, we literally mean around the world. I'm so excited because, again, first for the show, right? We have brought everyone who are coming onto the panel from all over the globe in real time. So definitely appreciate their time because some of them it's really late and some it's really early. So if you're a regular to the show, you know that we usually have a few minutes of banter where Michael and I will go back and forth. However, because we have so much to cover and so many guests for this show, we're going to kind of skip the banter and bring the guests on. We also had to streamline bios. As you know, when we go through, we really like giving a lot of time to kind of go over who the guests are on the show. With 7 people, we figured that would take up about 15 minutes of the show time. So what we're going to do instead, when the show posts to the PPN website, we will list everyone's full bio on there, as well as their LinkedIn URL so that you could make connections with all of these great leaders. So without further ado, how about we start bringing in the panelists, and I'll give a quick rundown of the folks that we have on today. Tom Pringle is a technology industry analyst, management consultant, and executive. He's the founder and director at Pilot Research Limited, and he'll be representing the UK for us today. Michelle Batt is a certified CX consultant, mentor, and facilitator, as well as a founding member and regional leader of the CXPA, and Michelle will be representing North America today. Along with Michelle, Bill Price will be representing North America. He formed Driva Solutions and co-founded the 9-country Limebridge Global Alliance, focused on delivering powerful customer experience improvements. Vaishali Dialani is a senior customer experience strategist at Canobos, and she is recognized as an emerging leader by CXPA in the Middle East, and she is ranked as one of the top 11 CXM stars worldwide. Georges Essama leads marketing, communications, and CX at Cameroon Telecommunications in Central Africa. He's a member of CXPA, the 2023 chair of CXPA Africa, and the 2022 CX Leader of the Year Cultural Award recipient. Whew. Wow, lots of mouthful. And I don't even have all the bios. Jesús Hoyos. He is the chief strategist and co-founder of Solvis Consulting, specializing in CRM and customer experience, and will be representing Latin America. We will also have one more person joining us a little bit later on in the show. His name will be Fabian Littau. He heads CX Consulting Division at Valantica CEC, and he is one of the fastest growing It is one of the fastest growing CS consultancies in Europe. So with that, why don't we get started? Michael, we have so much to dive into.
There is a lot. So before we jump into this first question, I want to set this up just a little bit because I have 3 graphs that I want to show as we go through this. And I recently did a study for a client, Sinbird, on consumer communications. And as a part of that, we asked several different questions around preferences. And this one I thought was really appropriate for our first question. So I'll just show this briefly, and then we can jump into the questions. But this question really was about why you would purchase or stop doing business with a company. So I think that relates very directly into this conversation around customer experience. And you can see America, EMEA, APAC broken out here around each of these. So the questions were, there's no obvious method for contacting the business listed on the website or mobile app. When I contact the company, I have to wait on hold. Company's customer service agent cannot resolve my issue. When communicating with the company, I have to interact with multiple representatives. I'm transferred to another company employee. I have to explain everything again. How many times have we done that? And the company does not have online self-service. So that's just a basic look at some of the data. And I'm going to bring these up again a little bit later. But I just wanted that as a backdrop to this question. So the first question, we really want to start with just an idea around each of the areas or regions. What's important to the customer? Speed of response, formal, informal, humans, bots, human and bots. So what do you think? I mean, Bill, you want to kick us off?
Sure, happy to. And thanks for inviting us all to join you today for this session. Excited about it. I think what's really important for the customer depends on what the issue is that the customer is bringing to the company or to the organization. Break it down maybe into three ways. They may want to buy something, browse or buy something. They may want to complain about something, or they may want to get information about something. Generically, or across all three, what they want is they want the resolution. That was one of the points in your chart that you showed us. They want resolution for their issue. They either want to buy that item or get that information right away. They want to find out the information, or they want to get something resolved right away. They don't want to have to come back a second time or a third time. They want to have a connection with the organization. They want to feel like they're understood, that they're appreciated, that they're valued. And then to your point about not being transferred, big deal in North America, probably the other regions as well. We've come up with a term called first point resolution, not first contact resolution, which could include transfers and callbacks. But the first point that the customer goes, whether it's online or whether it's with an agent, they want that resolved at that first point of resolution. And then one final point is they may want to come away. They probably come away from the contact saying, well, why did I even have to do that contact at all? Should the company have known about this? Could they have told me about it proactively? Could they have fixed it for me beforehand? So those are some things to think about in terms of what's really most important for the customer.
Any perspective from one of the other geographies?
Yeah, for the Latam perspective, the customer experience starts, from saying hello when you go to the retail store. There is a lot of, consultants in the CX world in Latin America that are focusing on managing the culture of the company. Forget the technology. Just be sure that you're truly customer first, customer centric. So in the last, 10 years, even before the pandemic, everything is about, how can I empower the employee to do something, for that customer? Now, if we switch to technology, everything has to do about WhatsApp, especially with everything that Bill just mentioned, Michael, based on your chart. People don't want to be transferred. People don't want to, go from one place to another. So WhatsApp is being used a lot just as the only channel to manage the experience. Banking, retailing, e-commerce, chatbots, chatting with people, talking to people. So that's probably, every time that we want to implement omnichannel, it looks like that is omnichannel focus on WhatsApp with all the stuff that you guys are mentioning.
That's great. Thanks, Jesus. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I love what Bill and Jesus have already mentioned. I spent a lot of time in Latin America and also in the US, but in addition to ease of use, speed, reliability, all the things that we always think about as we're delivering the customer experience. One of the key things I think that no matter where you are in the world is really trust. And there's a lot more studies now that are coming out that talk about that correlation. If we really need to build trust with the customers, there's a lot of big companies that come in. I'll say in many other regions, and particularly I saw it in Latin America, A lot of big companies come in, they're not familiar with the culture. They think, oh, they're all Spanish speakers, right? It's all gonna be the same. And that's a huge mistake. I've seen that done so many times, and it takes years for some of these companies to work into that market. The customers and employees, of course, your internal customers, have to have that trust. So you have to really focus on that customer first and building trust.
Thanks, Michelle. I mean, I think that's a really interesting point. And actually, one of the things that came out in that consumer preferences survey that we did, you could see very clearly that the channel itself has certain levels of trust already with the population. Now, it varied greatly by geography, by the way, especially by country, but also you could see it in the regions. But particularly around specific activities, you could see a big difference in the top preferences based on the risk profile of what they were doing. So in other words, if I was doing banking, I might want to use the phone. But if I'm doing entertainment, a social media was perfect for that. So there's a lot of variation around the perception of trust as well. Anybody else on that question?
I think I'd love to jump in. I agree with everything that Bill, Michelle, and Jesus said. Just to add on one thing, I think being from Dubai in the Middle East, we are served everything on platter. So I think the patience level of customers is also quite low, which makes it really difficult to provide experience to these impatient customers. So while we have trust and everything else, I think speed of response is extremely important for the Middle Eastern market, at least.
Actually, I was going to bring up a question related to that, right? When I think about in America, when I submit a question, I want the response. Not only do I want a response, I want the fix, right? Like I don't want to hear, give me 24 hours and I'll get back to you. But I'm curious if that's true in terms of, is it really the fix someone wants, or do they just want acknowledgement of their question, right? Because I'm not convinced, even though we say customers want response immediately, what does that really mean, right? And does that vary by geography? Are some people comfortable with, okay, just as long as I get an immediate, my question has come in, they've received it, they've acknowledged it, I'm okay waiting a little bit to get a response, and it doesn't have to be a fix?
I think it has to do with setting expectations. I mean, if you're selling me your brand and you don't commit to those expectations, are you going to provide the fix? Are you going to provide, tell me when are you going to fix it? And for example, and I'm going about, Latin America and Spanish speaking, I'm the one who press English. I don't press 2 for Spanish, so because I know that call center won't be able to help me, and because they don't understand, who Jesús Hoyos is, So, and I think, if you have the data about me, it doesn't matter where, which country you're coming from and where you at, you should be able to use it and set those expectations properly. So I think that's probably a misconception that we all have.
Yeah. It's just really interesting there, that kind of the expectations side of things. I mean, a recent experience I had was I emailed a provider that I use. I had a problem with the account, and I got an instant response, auto acknowledgement, fantastic. 2 to 3 business days, might take up to 5. We're busy at the moment. I was okay with that. It took 2 weeks.
That's right.
After I sailed past the 5th business day, I started to feel quite upset about things. So maybe more of a personal rather than a UK experience, but certainly something we see a lot of. And then I just want a quick point. I love the first point resolution, but I think that's a great line. I also think it's interesting. Everyone does seem to default to WhatsApp quite a lot now. Contact us on WhatsApp. I think I'm the only person on the planet who doesn't use WhatsApp. Actually, I'm willing to bet I'm not the only person on the planet that uses WhatsApp. And when the only option is WhatsApp, what do you do?
Well, let's get going, Tom. Come on.
and actually, you just segued right into the next question, Tom.
And actually, it fits perfectly with that chart I was going to show too, Jody. So I'll put that up real quick first. And it's interesting when you see this, you'll see public messaging, and we put WhatsApp with public messaging in this specifically. So we called it out in the notes around the question. But you can see the variation among the regions. EMEA still very email heavy, but you see how much it dropped off in the Americas. Phone's fairly even across because, again, it seems to be the most trusted channel and it's very immediate for a lot of problems. So I feel, we saw a lot of a preference there, and also probably a lot of habit. And even when we broke this out generationally, you'd see some difference, but not as much as you would expect. Like you would have thought SMS would have been higher probably. I know we all have used SMS a lot over the last few years. And I think the one thing that I would add is that we're seeing a lot of signs of fatigue with SMS, especially around higher trust activities. But anyway, that's just I just thought that would be an interesting backdrop for this question, Jody.
Well, in Latin America, if you don't have WhatsApp as a channel, you're doing something wrong. I mean, and it's WhatsApp, Facebook messages, and this is the rest. And there's tons of new technologies like Yalo, for example, Chat IO as well in Latin America. They're focused just to everything in WhatsApp. I mean, it's you have the good and the bad and the ugly in there, but if you don't use, keep in mind, SMS costs a lot of money in Latin America. And email, who knows? Email is part, it won't die. The phone, you're always going to use the phone, but WhatsApp is big in Latin America. It's a requirement.
I feel like so many people are also jaded from the phone too, because we want that support. We pick up the phone, we're feeling good about it, and then we get stuck in that press 1 for this support, press 2, and it's so frustrating that you just hang up.
Yeah, as soon as you get into IVR hell, it's
so I didn't recognize that statement. I mean, IVRs are wonderful, aren't they? I thought everyone loved them.
And then you have the problem. And then you have the problem that you're translating the IVR to the chatbot.
Yeah.
Yes. What were you going to say, Michelle?
Oh, I was going to say, and I feel bad. A couple of people haven't even spoken yet, so I'm really hesitant to bring it up. But I was just going to say that, Michael, as you look at the data, that last bar chart that you showed, if you look at it over the last few years, those trends are also changing, and that goes to Jody's point, right? There's a lot of fatigue in certain channels, and phone in the US, and in most places, right? So
there definitely was fatigue, and you could see it reverted back depending on the activity quite a lot. And I will say that one obvious one was the SMS one, though. So one of the questions we asked was, over the last 12 months, how's your experience changed with SMS? And universally around the globe, there's much more fatigue than there used to be. And I can tell you that the Gen Z were the worst about it. They pushed back more on it than any other demographic, which I think, it surprised me, but I think we underestimate that sometimes about how much we have tried to add SMS to all sorts of things that we communicate.
Now, I will say personally, and a little personal antidote, one thing but from an SMS, and I both love it and hate it, right? Because I will opt in to the services I really want to hear from, except they send those awesome offers and you click to buy pretty quick when it's hooked to your account on your phone, right? So I find myself, my budget is over a lot monthly because of that.
Yeah. Well, and Jody, the other thing in the survey, that was the one part that actually did get high ratings from SMS, when you had special offers or discounts. And it also was tied to location. If you were getting geo-based, offers, you were willing to have it track you. But if you weren't getting anything for it, they did not want to be tracked.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on the particular channels and your regions and which one jumps out?
Yeah. If I may say, I think the observation that we have also here in Africa is that, as you said, WhatsApp is really becoming a very important communication channels. And I would think social media in general, WhatsApp or even Facebook, are much more. Like some customers would even prefer, to go on social media accounts, on Facebook account of a company to complain about a product or a service, instead of, contacting the other channels like telephone or call centers and so on. They feel that it will be much more rapid for the company to resolve their problems because of of the brand. The company don't want her brands to be engaged or so on. So they're doing everything to have that public image that is interesting. So WhatsApp and social media also as the most used channel.
I know we are talking about digital customer experience, right? But from a typical European perspective, what you still need to mention is that you need an address on your website, because people here still love to write letters just to get the load off their shoulders to tell the company about their issue or their problem. So first of all, there's still coming letters to the, for example, customer support, and emails, very long emails where people just tell their story. And the second step then is get a fast response, but not just, okay, we got your message and we are working on it, but more that there is a human being taking care of the issue and providing, let's say, digital feedback that things are happening, but processed by human beings still, from a typical European perspective.
See, now that definitely shows a cultural problem for me. When I wrote my survey, I did not include letters on there, so I completely missed the boat on.
I need to ask. First of all, I'm shocked about physical letters being a form. But do the companies physically read all of the letters that are coming in, or is there a system that you're scanning through and it's doing the quick scan?
It sounds like a joke, but actually it's really true. When we step in CX projects, when we are talking to the service departments, they have, of course, different channels where messages come in, all the website messages, the WhatsApp or SMS. And there is always this physical message still coming in. And next step, when we are talking about orders, for example, people are still using physical orders. They are sending in the stuff. And it's an issue for companies to digitize the process then, to take this physical stuff, get it into their systems and proceed in a digital way. This is always an issue.
Yeah, I would like to add two things to that one, because when you have CX projects in Latin America, the retail store, the supermarket, they smile, good morning, or I go to somebody and I say, hey, could you help me with this? That's part as well of the CX, in terms of a strategy, and that's big in Latin America. The second thing, even though we have the IVR and we have chatbots, and going back to the letters, people want to upload PDF files, people want to upload images. And having that through WhatsApp and having that conversation with somebody, turns out to be good. I had that experience in the Philippines, all over Latin America, and in South Africa as well, projects that have been involved. It's not the automation, it's the result of the automation. If that drives you a conversation, customers are extremely happy that they're talking to somebody, through digital channels, but they have a conversation. There's no bot out there. And I have seen, especially in higher education in Latin America and the Philippines, people, buy stuff through those channels, and the increase of the sale there's a relationship of having a conversation and a conversion.
So one of the issues I want to build on that, Jesús, one of the issues to be concerned about when we talk about channels is sort of asking the question, are these channels joined up? In other words, if I go into a retail store, as you're mentioning, can I get a resolution about my invoice? As opposed to that salesperson saying, or that person in the retail store saying, well, that's not really my job, but you have to call the call center. You got to go, or you got to send a text message. So the idea of thinking through these channels, I'd say holistically is maybe one word for it, but there are companies in the US that aren't getting that right. In other words, they are not empowering and not enabling all these different channels. And so the customer says, well, I just went into your store. You can hear them in the call center. I just went into your store, didn't get that answer, and now I'm talking to you. They better get that resolved the second time, because now that's not the first point. That's a second point for the customer. So it's important to make sure these channels are joined up and enabled to handle what the customer is going to be asking when they walk in the store, when they send the WhatsApp message, whatever it might be.
That probably ties directly into that idea about the handoff too, right? I mean, that if it's connected, then you won't lose the information when it moves across different channels and different people. So yeah, that makes sense.
And just to add on about the EMEA.
Go ahead.
Add on about the EMEA. I also feel like a lot of people still in the Middle East love to document. So even if you're using anything on your mobile app and you want to report something, you have to email them from your phone. and it connects you from the form itself to add your email address and then write that and attach a picture of the product that is is defective. So a lot of people love to document things, and that's why red tape is still very common in this side of the world and still a bit old school.
Yeah, I believe, Bill, based on what you're saying, I think companies need to understand the technologies that they have. Do they fit? There's a gap. Where the multi-channel, the omni-channel will reside, call centers, CRMs, in between, and there's a lack of understanding of the current technology, and there's a lot of promises from the vendors, but data needs to be part of this, how to use that technology. So, so we meet expectations,
Actually, talking about, I'm sorry, did I just cut someone off? Did someone want to weigh in? The joys of multiple people on a panel. I apologize. We'll also have to bear with talking over each other. There was a question that came in. Christy asked, and I think this is relevant to what we were talking about with expectations. Of the folks represented on this panel, is there a place or a country that is more forgiving, if you will, in terms of time to response? Does anyone feel that in your region it's okay if you're a little later, as long as the experience that you then give them is a positive one?
Really good question.
I think especially here, no matter the issue, most customers will they don't have so much patience. It's just the fact that in some cases, or in many cases, it's like sometimes they don't have any choice. Let me take an example. We are like in an environment where there are public organizations, for example, who are still, owning various aspects, various services and various products from entire countries. And sometimes customers don't always have the best experience using those products and services. It's not just that there's so much more patience, because anyone wants, his issue to be solved, or, the company to perform well. But it's just the fact that sometimes they don't have any other choices in some cases. So depending on the environment. So I think nobody would really be so much more patient. They will understand, okay, you acknowledge my request, but I think you have to do something to resolve it in the most fastest solution possible.
Yeah, addressing Christy's question again directly, in the United States, we've seen that customers in places like the West Coast and in New Mexico and some other states are seemingly less patient. And I say seemingly because they don't contact the companies as much on the same issues as customers that might be from Boston or New York or the East Coast or parts of the Midwest. And the question there is, are they more forgiving, or are they just more tolerant, or they just run out of patience entirely? So but I see it globally. We've done work globally as well, where customers in parts of Asia, particularly Japan, don't tend to contact companies very much. And you can presume again that they're more patient, or you could just say that maybe they're hesitant to make an inquiry or a complaint to the company. But this propensity to complain, this customer complaint behavior is really a hot topic, and one that maybe we can explore some more in one of the upcoming hot seat discussions, Jody.
Absolutely. And I'm actually shocked by what you said with the West Coast versus East Coast. I will say, coming from the East Coast, I would not consider us patient at all.
No, I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying West Coast patient, East Coast not.
Sorry, I misunderstood. Absolutely.
No.
Then I'm there 100%.
Yeah, West Coast patient, East Coast less, especially as you go up into kind of that New York, Boston corridor up there. And it's partly just because, there's a culture, there's an intensity to parts of the United States, as there are in different parts of the world. I think each of us could talk about that with respect to our own regions.
I also feel I absolutely agree with Bill and Georges, and that's a great question, Christy. Just to add on one thing, I also think there's a pattern where if it's a very high, busy city or busy country that you're part of, then no one has time to sit and wait, and the options are multiple. Compared to if you're countryside, or if you don't have many options, then you just have to deal with what you have to deal with. Secondly, I think it's also quite dependent on the industry and the customer base that you're working with. In cases where it's retail, obviously you have more options compared to like fintech, specifically for like low-income migrant workers. Then they're very limited to the options they have. So really dependent on industry and the customer base as well.
And it's a question of setting the expectation as well. When you as a company provide different channels, for example, to get in contact with the company itself, the moment you provide a phone number, the expectation is that you call to get an immediate response, and there is anyone who helps you with your problem. The moment you provide WhatsApp, you expect that there is a chat starting. You ask, you get the answer later on. If you only provide email, for example, the perception is you write an email and maybe it might take 1 or 2 days until you receive your answer. So it's your question first as a company, which kind of experience you promise and which kind of experience you can provide afterwards. Because for each and every channel, you need the staff, the power, the manpower to provide people with the right answers.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Go.
No, it's okay. I was just going to set up the next question, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that we see that a lot, particularly with some of the newer technologies and newer, even though chatbot is not new, it's just there's so many examples of some of the newer channels that are being used. The company will launch it, and if they don't have a real strategy of how making sure that there's a team in place that's ready to manage this, that there's an approach, which is all a part of what customer experience management is, as we all know, but the minute that there's that loss and you launch it, but the team's not ready and you don't have a strategy in place, and it happens so much more frequently than we'd like. So that's really a plug for making sure that you have a full strategy in place and are ready to go, and your team is trained on everything and all of that good stuff.
Hey, Michael, before we jump into the next question, something you just said, Michelle, made me think about the experience from the phone side, right? When you call into call centers, and when we're all putting together, we're putting together our strategy when customers call in for support, we think about, hey, we're going to hook this into a call center. It's 24/7. But I'd like to dig a little bit deeper on that, right? The expectation from the call centers, when customers are calling in, they know they're going to get a call center. Any best practices or things that we should consider based on region as we're setting up call centers for the 24/7 support?
Well, one quick one I think is to match what the customer needs are. I think in the United States, in particular, with 3 time zones, and sometimes adding the Atlantic time zone, if you're talking about Eastern Canada, 4 time zones, there are still companies that stay with an East Coast or a West Coast time. In other words, not 24/7 for phone calls. They're saying outside of those hours, you can text us, email us, or whatever. We'll get back to you sometime. But customers are often constrained by operating hours, business type hours for even in the call centers in the United States. And that's very frustrating. And so 24/7 is one answer to that, but you may not have the demand at 3 o'clock in the morning necessarily, but at least to have it, let's say 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. In any time zone in the United States is maybe a minimal best practice to think about, rather than, we're going to have it 7 till 5 Eastern, in which case it closes at 2 o'clock Pacific, and so you're out of luck. So right. That's just one thing to think about in terms of the opposite of a best practice too.
Well, and even if you're a U.S. company that deals globally, your time frame is even more reduced if you're going on a 7 to 3 or.
Mm-hmm. And that's the case in Latin America. There's a lot of BPOs and outsources all over Latin America for the Latin market and from the US market, and be able to have those skill sets that people are fully bilingual. They understand the cultures. They understand, responding to somebody from California versus New York, like we're talking here now, not to talk about sports, So all that stuff is part of your communication channels in the call center. But I think the most important thing, which we always forget, is that, the call center, and it doesn't matter using phone or the other channels in the call center, is that you need to have the access to the data and the empowerment so people, the employees, can use that data. Okay. And one of the things that's happening in Latin America is that the channel doesn't know, the phone channel doesn't know social media. The social media team doesn't know how to do messaging. Messaging and social media sometimes is managed by agencies that have no idea. They are community managers, but they don't know customer service. They don't have COPC standards. All that needs to be part of your strategy so you can maximize that relationship with the customer.
That's a great point. Michael, I think that segues into...
I think that does fit really well with the next question. So we have such an opportunity here to take a look at this from a bunch of different angles. So I'm just curious from each of you, like what's the largest CX challenges you see in your region, both from a customer perspective and also from the company and trying to deliver, that experience. And Fabian, I know you're interested in responding to this one. So if you want to kick it off.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael. And I just want to grab Bill's point with the different time zones and put it to a European perspective, because we do not have as many time zones as other continents or regions have, but we have so many different languages on our very small continent. So it's a bit more than 400 million people. And you have the big languages as Spanish, French, German, Italian, English, for example, sorry, Tom, when you consider UK as part of the continent. And then you have Swedish and Finnish and Polish and Czech, and it's so many different languages. And it's both for companies. It's not easy to set up channels like a service center or a service team, because where to locate them, which languages to provide. And it's the same for each and every channel, for all your websites, for your shops, for all the data you provide, or all the papers you provide. You always need to consider first which is the key languages that you want to deal with. And second thing, when it comes to challenges, Europe is a continent where we have strict data protection rules and regulations, so the GDPR. Before you talk to customers out there, they need to agree on that you might talk to them, that you might contact them. It's really not easy to deal with the consent management, especially in B2C context. And this is really a big issue in Europe, because many companies underestimate what is necessary to provide the right services with the right technical infrastructure and the right organization behind.
Fabian, I'm curious about one thing too around that, because doing business in Europe, I've noticed it's very common for people to speak multiple languages, right? I mean, it's a small place. You go from country to country often and often multiple languages, but that's not true in other places. I mean, in the US, we can barely understand each other from the north to the south or the east to the west. So is that common? Is that offering those multiple languages, but also a lot of people don't necessarily have to be in their native language? They could.
Absolutely. I was working for a medium-sized company which was dealing with European customers, and we decided on the minimum of 16 languages to provide all the information that you need to do business with. It gets more and more complicated when you're doing B2C business, because there are many people out there who only speak their local language. In B2B business, there is, let's say, the minimum of English, but for some countries still this is not enough. So you need to have a second or third language. This is the situation that we're dealing with. You can imagine you have the different languages, so you need your sales teams, your marketing teams, your service teams dealing with the languages. And for many countries, you have specific regulations when it comes to especially e-commerce, how to do e-commerce business. Of course, there's European regulations as well, but locally adjusted or adopted. And first of all, you need to understand what the local requirements are.
In Latin America, you need to have the neutral Spanish if you have international call centers, and then you have to have Portuguese, for Brazil.
And just to add on, especially from the Middle East, almost 41%, 41 million people are immigrants. And that plays a huge role when cultural sensitivity becomes a huge challenge for organizations to keep up to. It's not only taking care of the 60 languages, native languages that the Middle East covers, that is usually America, that's usually Arabic or Egyptian, but more about people from India across the globe, South Asian market, that actually come in the Middle Eastern regions as migrant workers to come and live there, who don't really know English, are more focused towards their native languages, and to be able to cater to them. So personalization and localization becomes really difficult, along with cultural sensitivity. Huge challenge here.
And Michael, I think this would be a great question before we move on to the others. The importance of understanding the challenges per region. I know we're not going to call out each individual area, but I do think this question is really important to kind of get everyone's thoughts based in region from a challenge perspective. Yeah. So I want to make sure that everyone gets some time. Georges, would you like to talk about some of the challenges in the African region?
Yeah. We made a research like a few months ago, and taking a sample of around 100 great organizations from all over Africa, trying to analyze, the organizational structure and so on and so forth. And what we discovered is this: in that sample, around 12 to 15% of these organizations had established taking care of the customer or taking care of their employees as part of their vision, mission, or values, right? So we have around 85% of great organizations who are, generating values, doing business and so on. But on the building, on the fundamental aspect of their business, their vision, their mission and values, they are not very so much focused, talking about customers or their staff. That was the first observation. And the second one that we also found is that the same amount of organizations, 12 to 15%, have established appointing a CCO or a CXO as a member, of the decision-making table in the organization, right? So you have like the same sample, 85 to 80%, 90% of great companies who doesn't have a CXO, who doesn't have a CCO at all, taking decisions or arguing for the customers where decisions are taken in the organization. So based on these observations, one of the challenges about how can we support organizations, leadership of organizations and companies in Africa, to help them build foundations of their business model around the people and around the customers, to make sure that what they do is sustainable and what they do is valuable, not just about financial valuation, but also to do something that matters much more than money and so on. So I think these are some of the challenges that we can encounter here.
So that's a good point, wrapping in the company's mission and values and making sure that is promoted externally, that being something very important for that region. Thank you for sharing. Looking at my screen here, just trying to see who that we highlighted. Jesús, do you want to talk about some of the challenges in Latin America? I know you briefly commented with Fabian in terms of languages. Other challenges?
Yeah, well, adoption, and this is the key thing. Yeah, customer service, customer experience is nice, but I need to lower the cost and I need to increase the sales. That's the bottom line. So you can have the strategy, and there's tons of good, consultants in the region doing excellent, in providing that strategy and doing the hand-holding, make sure that you can execute. But with, after the pandemic, the reality is, yeah, but I need to sell more. How is that called deflection rate going? So, and that, that adoption, creates a big gap with, a lot of companies not understanding the technology because they have a little of everything. They have Surf, they have Sendes, they have Five9, they have, Twilio, they have, Qualtrics or Medallia, and then which one is which one? So this is just for the small business all the way up to big multinationals in Latin America. So the adoption is tough, to accomplish.
You mentioned some of those technologies, and I agree. I mean, I can't even keep my head wrapped around all of the technologies that I'm logging into every day, and I'm not on the front lines of customer service and customer support. I cannot imagine, right, that suite set that we're all dealing with. That's just it just keeps growing every day. So
well, I could tag on to Jesus's comment and George's, because it really is, whether it's North America, Latin America, any of these regions, I think just post-COVID and just during this kind of economic uncertainty, all of the companies are so focused on growth. And they think of growth as more of the traditional growth and going, Jesus, you just said the words. It's like they go get stuck in the rut of, we need more sales, whatever it takes. And so CXOs, CX leaders across the board, I think really everywhere, are challenged right now. So now more than ever, it's critical that CX leaders show the direct correlation to specific tangible financial metrics. If they're not doing that, and this is sort of something that we've all been talking about forever, right? It's something that's a challenge forever. But now more than ever, if you're not showing that correlation to revenue growth, new sales, all of these things that the leaders of companies are looking for, if you don't show that connection, you're really going to be missing the boat, and you're going to lose some of that power that hopefully you've built. There's a study I was just going to mention, maybe we don't want to throw out all the consulting firms, but McKinsey put out a really great study, even just back in just May recently, that you can find. And it's about, it really is about a purposely designing and managing customer experience. They call it experience-led growth. And it's a powerful strategy for organizations to differentiate in a competitive marketplace and drive profitable growth. And there's tons of, correlations and really interesting financial things in there. So it's all measured by share of wallet, repeat purchases, all of these kinds of things. So there are some really good studies now that even leaders, CX leaders, can bring to the table, and you need to show some of your results alongside of that. How are you doing that? How are you going to be providing growth for the company? Because that's the key word right now, is growth.
And growth at all costs is out the window. It is
sustainable. That's what they try to, they try to spin it, but it's a tough one.
Let me tag on to this one as well, if I can, Jody and Michael, which is CX challenge that we're seeing in the States, on top of what Michelle was mentioning across the States and Latin America, is one of getting more simple, becoming simpler, becoming less complex. Customers are frustrated. They don't have time to deal with it, whether it's finding the right channel or getting the right information. And so companies that we work with and ones that we read about, talk about, they just have to rethink how they do things, make sure they have fewer steps in the process to sign up, make it easier to change a plan. There have been really terrible articles recently about companies that are making it hard to cancel your subscriptions or your programs. And that leads into a related challenge, which is holding on to your best customers. Because customers coming out of COVID in particular, even beforehand, we kind of forgot about it, but coming out of COVID, they have a lot more choice these days, and they can change their subscription quickly. They can change streaming services. They can even change their bank a little more easily than they could before COVID, because they want to. And so figuring out what are some of those reasons for churn is really an important part of the CX challenge, that customers want to stay. They prefer to stay in many cases, but they'll leave really quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting in the survey that the communication survey that we did. One of the things that came out really clearly was, if you met the customer where they were, if you did offer their channel, their preferred channel, 82% more likely to remain a customer, 69% more likely to buy more, and 66% more likely to become an advocate, which is amazing numbers. And I think if you look at that from that perspective, why would you not accommodate all of the different channels and tie things together? It's just too important.
But to be honest, Michael, we all know how hard it is to provide a simple way of making business together, because especially in CX, you come from a legacy, you have your legacy IT architecture, you need to integrate all this stuff. to provide a simple front end. And this not only for the customers out there, but also for your sales teams or service teams. The user experience must be simple so that the customer experience can be simple as well. And this is a very hard job for all the IT or CX companies.
Well, one of the trends in Latin America, going back, to make things very simple, is a lot of companies are becoming fintechs. In Latin America, between 30 and 50% of the people are using banks. So that gives you 50% of people that want to pay with something else. So you look at, Mercado Libre, you look at Rappi and many others of these companies that are providing fintech technology so you can realize those payments and make your life easier. So that's part of the customer experience that we're seeing a lot in Latin America.
And I want to circle back, Bill, when you touched upon the COVID and kind of what happened after COVID. But before I move down that path, I want to give Vaishali and Tom the chance to talk about the challenges in the region. So I'm going to put a pin in that for 1 second. And Tom, I'm going to jump to you and talk about what are some of the challenges in the UK that you're seeing?
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's lots of overlap here. Of course, there is. I think it's interesting. It probably also overlaps with the great question we had earlier about, is there a country that's more patient or not? I don't know. Perhaps this group could correct me. But we always seem to get the impression that people think that Brits are very good at queuing and waiting and being patient. And I'm not entirely sure it's always 100% true, firstly. And second, no real data to back this one up, but I think it's interesting. I think when a customer has an explanation as to why something went wrong, acknowledgement of that, they are far more likely to be very understanding about something, whatever that experience that went wrong was. So I think we're kind of back in that place of expectation management. And I'll say one last thing, because I know we're going to talk about this a bit later. There's a common thread here for me, which is about the data. And that's not UK specific, that's everywhere. It is the data that weaves together all the different channels, the journeys, and the way that people want to be interacted with. So I just feel like that's something that we're going to come to in a moment or two when we start talking about some of the rather new and exciting technology, which may or may not be of benefit. Watch this space.
See, you're already planting the seeds for the next few questions. Vaishali, do you want to talk about your challenges in Middle East?
Yeah. Sure. I mentioned a few earlier, but I absolutely agree on the legacy of technology. I think that's a huge one. I also think that now there's a point where there is awareness, but there is no investment into it. They understand that they are willing, that there is a problem that needs to be fixed, but we don't have the resources, we don't have the capital. I think that transition to let's fix this, put in the resources that we require, the human, the people, or the financial revenue that's required to put in, is really difficult. So with that comes a lot of change that I think it's really hard to bring into the organization. And I think that's, again, a global thing, but in different aspects of business, it becomes slightly harder when the higher management's really rigid and tight. People are expecting recession in different parts of the world. So that's also evolving for many parts of the world as well for us.
And I think when we talk about the investment, this is a perfect segue to unpinning my topic, because it's going to lead into the next question. So, Michael, if you have the chart to get ready, we'll talk about it. But right, Bill, you brought up COVID and expectations, and I think about that time. The solutions were coming out so rapidly, right? Companies were quickly pivoting and figuring out how everything then had to go digital and the experiences we were providing. And I think as consumers, we were a little bit more forgiving, right? Because we were just happy that we were able to interact with we had a solution of some sort. So we were okay. We were okay with those stumbling blocks. And I think that patience level dropped off pretty quickly. Like now we're a couple of years out, and I'm expecting a way better experience. Enter the next question in talking about the impact of large language models, right, and the introduction of generative AI tools. Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about this chart, and we can tie in?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite questions. We ask some questions specifically around bots and chat bots and interactions. And so you could see, if you ask really directly, you can see, do I prefer to chat with a human or for customer support? Well, sure. Almost everybody says they prefer to talk to a human over an automated system. But as you go down through this, you'll notice there's some other really interesting differences. Like, I don't mind interacting with an automated support chat system first, and then being transferred to a live agent if needed. And then you can also see there's a fair number, particularly in the US, that they're often able to resolve their service issues with a self-service automated, chatbot type system. And then there are a small number of people that say they prefer to just deal with the automated system. I don't want to talk to humans. And I mean, it's still above 25% for all the countries or all the regions. So you can see that's still fairly strong. And then lastly, I often, and this one shouldn't surprise anybody, but I often find that transfers between an automated chatbot and a human agent is unsatisfactory. And I think this kind of goes back to the conversation we were having around integrated channels or communications across the channels. If that breaks down, that's one of the biggest things that people really push back on, I suspect, no matter what the region is.
So, after seeing the chart, who wants to take the question and dive into what impact do you think large language models and AI technologies are having on the experience in your regions?
As of today, nothing. I mean, in Latin America, what people are doing right now is transferring the IVR to the chat flow, and they believe that they have a chatbot, but then they move into a chatbot, but they don't have a knowledge base. So there goes your large language model. And there's a lot of security, privacy stuff that needs to be considered. I think it's coming down in the pipeline, but we don't, a lot of the companies don't have the right data to make it happen. So that, again, that's something they have to do with technology and adoption. However, there's tons of technology right now in Latin America. They are ahead of the curve of doing, predicting, modeling, machine learning, that is helping you optimize. I mean, there's a huge market in Latin America for that, huge. Okay. And, companies from Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, and Chile, they are developing these solutions. But for the large language models, I don't see that happening anytime soon in Latin America yet.
Interesting.
I think it's the same here. Africa is a very social environment. We like to to be together, and so AI or language modeling or any other great technological advancement. The feeling is that companies are not so much more advanced or actually much more interested on these new technologies. The issue is really much more on how, as we said a few minutes ago, how can we provide a simple, smart, or simple experience, easy experience all along the journey for customers. So I think what the results that Michael just showed is a great reflection of what we think here. Very much more human interactions, even in the first touch points, even during all the process. So I think this will last for a moment's sake. Also, I think.
There was a post on my LinkedIn feed over the weekend, and I thought it was a little bit shocking. There was a company, and I'm blanking right now on the name, but they had this AI voice experience from this interaction with customers. And I listened to the preview that was up on my feed, and it wasn't that robotic that you're listening to an AI generated voice. I mean, it was human. And there was emotion in the voice. I mean, the advancement in that type of technology is actually very fast and very scary, right? I mean, I couldn't tell that I was listening to a robot versus an actual human. So I'm wondering, how much of an impact is that going to have because of the call center complexities, which we'll get into a little bit on the next question. But Fabian, you're shaking your head. Did you have something to add in?
It was my first thought when I saw Michael's results from the study he did. How can people know if they are chatting with a chatbot or with a human being, because if it's in a good way, you have no chance to see the difference to a certain point then. This is just not possible anymore. And when it comes to generative AI in general, from my point of view, there is a first mover advantage. If you made your homework, if you have your IT systems in place, if you have the right data connected, if your organization can work with it, you can create much better content. You can bring it out to the people far more personalized than before. All the segmentation, the direct marketing, everything will be so much better. Your service team will be far more efficient and better in responding. So there will be a huge advantage for the first movers. The moment all of the companies out there will do it, it will be a hell of content out there, just too much content. And I'm always wondering, and I'm discussing with so many different people about that. What is the next stage then? Because we are always talking about the outbound, always talking about sales and marketing and everything. But the other side will do the same. So all the people who are working in purchasing and all the people who are buying stuff and are going through the internet looking for the right things to buy, they will be supported by AI as well. And then one machine will be talking to another machine, and then
they're going to be making a movie about us in about another 5 years.
That's right. That's right.
Well,
Fabian, algorithms.
One comment back, Fabian, on your work, because I was curious about this too, and the more I looked at the chatbot data, that's why I said even in the slide when I said if you ask somebody directly, do you want to talk to a human or a chatbot, they're always going to say human, right? It's just, or at least most will, 75% at least. But because of the advantage, of these new intelligent chatbots, smart bots, whatever you want to call them, it is really difficult to tell. I guess the only thing I would say about that, though, is that they're still limited in distribution right now. So you can still easily get caught in the IVR version of the chatbot hell just as easily. So until they're all out there and until you've upgraded. But once you get to that certain point, Jody, to your point, I can't tell. I don't know how you tell the difference when it gets to that point.
And
I think personally,
I prefer chatting with a chatbot which is connected to the ERP system, to the CRM system, to the PIM system, to the shop system, and everything, rather than talking to a person who has no idea who I am and what I actually want.
Yeah. I don't know, absolutely. I got to pile in, and I see that one of our viewers has already beaten me to one of the comments I was going to make, which was a lot of heavy lifting being done by ifs in terms of kind of this potential future. So I think kind of the potential of this kind of capability is huge, and that's obvious. I think pretty much for all and how it could benefit all. The experience, but particularly you start thinking about if the data is right, if it can be integrated, if it can manage the legacy, and you run into a lot of problems very quickly with those statements. So I don't know about any of the other panelists or our host today, but I don't know how many of you have tried to sell a data quality initiative to a company as being something that's really exciting to do and going to be something that they're going to shout to their shareholders about. And the truth is, of course, it's foundational work. If you don't have the right data quality, you're going to find that all the right integrations, you're going to find that your very cool chatbot that doesn't sound like a chatbot might be saying some very interesting, at best, things to your customers, and also doing it in a very automated, very quick way. So making a lot of mistakes at a speed far beyond any human can make, which is, probably the downside, right? But the last thing I'll say is just real quick. Just the last thing I'll say on this, though, is it's interesting. Ages ago, people used to say this. I don't know it's still true. I kind of feel it. I feel cheated if I think I'm speaking to a person. It turns out I'm speaking to a machine. If the company hasn't been forthright about that, I would automatically lose some of the trust I had in that company.
Yeah, and I would agree with you on that one, Tom. And I think companies that go down that path are going to be causing really big problems for themselves, because the way that a lot of the generative AI tools based today, they're not necessarily curated very well. And so you have to be they have to be very careful if it's a full on automation solution. What I'm seeing in the States, among other advances, is a lot of real-time AI applied to assisting the agent to find the right tools or the right response to customers. So the tools, these AI tools, listen to the customer's interactions in real time. Let's say it's a phone call, and then say, the system says to itself, "Ooh, we've heard this before. This type of customer has asked this question before, and agent, you should really pull down this solution or bring this knowledge article to bear or speak this way, maybe apologize this way." And then the customers don't really know what's going on, but the agents get assisted, and the conversations are shorter, more simple, as I said before, but also they get to resolution faster. So looking at specific tools like that are exciting. And just one other one to touch on, there's a startup company in California that is going way beyond the idea of accent neutralization, which is a hot topic for BPOs around the world. They're actually enabling a customer service rep anywhere in the world, whether it's a BPO or a captive agent, to speak their own language and their own accent, and it gets completely translated into the language of the customer. So if someone is speaking in a variation in a small language in India, or they're speaking Hindi, or they're speaking Spanish, or whatever the language is, and the customer, let's say, is from America, then it comes across in American English, and it's real-time translated. So tools like that are phenomenal, and those are based on an LLM in terms of having a very huge language sample. So I think we're going to see some very specific but very powerful examples like that are apart from the full automation that Tom and I are both, and all of us, are worried about.
I have one example of that, and probably it's going to tell you there's a lot of time before all these companies get to know the data. If I ask, I'm Puerto Rican, so I love salsa music and baseball. Okay, so when I ask Alexa to play some salsa music, here comes Mark Anthony all the time, every time, and and based on what I know and what I use Alexa and play the music, they should know that I'm a salsa classic guy, funny all stars. Why you bring me Mark Anthony? So, and that's the case with the IVR and the chatbots out there.
Right.
And in Latin America, it happens a lot too. Bias. And we talk about regions. Talking to somebody from Medellin is different to talking to somebody from Bogota, somebody from San Juan, Puerto Rico, to what we call La Isla, which is the rest of the island, or somebody for Monterrey or Mexico City. So understanding that and going back to the translation, Bill, I think companies are, they need to get that data right. They need to be sure they have it right. Otherwise, why do it?
Well, and it's interesting that I was just looking. It's funny you mentioned this, because I was looking at a post this morning on LinkedIn, and it did this two-person segmentation comparison, right? So, one person, second person. The first person, born in 1948, grew up in England, married a second time, 2 children, successful business, wealthy, spends their winter holidays in the Alps and likes dogs. And the other one, 1948, grew up in England, married a second time, 2 children, successful business, wealthy, spend their winter holidays in the Alps and likes dogs. First one, King Charles. Second one, Ozzy Osbourne.
Yes.
Oops.
They meet those ICP criteria, but
they do.
Wow.
Yeah.
That experience delivered would be totally off the mark.
Sorry. I left everybody stunned now.
That's
right.
When you mentioned that, and thinking back to what Fabian said, right, bringing in this idea of how strict the data privacy regulations are over in Europe and the amount of information you're collecting, I mean, at some level, consumers have to be willing to give up a bit more to receive that experience that they desire, correct? And there's almost an imbalance there, because we don't necessarily have we're not at the place yet where we're willing, as consumers, we're willing to give up a lot in order to have a defined customer experience. So, it's going to be interesting what happens because the regulations just keep getting more strict and more strict. And, over in the United States, I know that we go state by state. So it's not even across the United States. It's every individual state, which is a nightmare.
The same is in Brazil, region by region, state by state in Brazil. Very tough to do that in Brazil.
What is important here for people in general is that I have the power over my data. So I can decide which data I provide and to whom, to which company. On the other hand side, if I want a better service, if I want to have a more personalized service, it is clear that I have to tell a bit more and to give a bit more data that the service gets better and better. Most of the times I have the feeling that I'm part of an A/B testing and I'm always the B, because I don't know what should I do with this product or with this kind of newsletter or whatever. With this news, it's just not relevant for me. Because I'm very strict with my data. The moment I provide more data, that moment I will get a more personalized offering.
That's your presumption, Fabian, and the challenge is a lot of companies collect that data, whether it's on surveys or specific functions, and they don't use it or they don't remember it, and that's even worse because now they've exposed themselves. Hey, we really want to know more about you. We're going to make this better experience for you, and if they don't apply it, customers go, forget it. It's probably one of your future survey questions, Michael. But then they go like, I am going away now because you didn't remember me. You didn't even remember what I told you.
I also feel like it depends on the level of personalization, which is not creepy, but it's that right balance between like, I want you to know a little about me, but not too much about me that you just start advertising everything. So like, I like that color, but does not mean you show me only that. So it's not being creepy as an organization as well.
Well, and over focused on the wrong part of the segmentation.
Exactly.
Right? I'm a photographer and I have a fairly good collection of high-end camera equipment. Tom, don't laugh. But I bought my mother a Christmas present a few years ago, $149 point and shoot camera off of Amazon. And guess what I get almost every day from Amazon? This is the top camera in digital cameras this week. It's $129. Cool.
Yeah.
Why do I care?
But I think you need to use the data, the right moment, and you don't need much technology. I'll give you one example. I went to Iowa State. I met my wife over there. We've been married 30 plus years. And every year during St. Valentine's Day, I get an email. Remember those good old times back in Iowa State with your wife and your people, and this and that. And they're upselling me, the alumni fee and everything else. But, they touch the emotional part of it and they do remember. Those small things are crucial, to manage the experience.
So I'm curious, underneath this kind of discussion about the differences, how important is this for companies that do business across these different regions? And should they do they have to adapt to all these different cultural changes, differences in country by country, not just region, or do they have to do that? I mean, what's the incentive? Because it's complicated. How do they navigate the complexity if you're a multinational?
That's been an issue for decades in so many ways, Michael, but it's gotten to be more so now as Fabian pointed out, the privacy laws, they're not just rules. I mean, these are strict laws in Europe require a multinational to conform to that. I think just to boil it down, the companies that we support or that we see that are multinationals based in the United States that have operations around the world, to answer that specifically from my experience, they do set up as much as possible global standards, and then they adapt them locally rather than being multi-local, which is very complicated and very expensive. They try to make it global, have global standards, realizing they have to temper those or adapt those based on rules in China, laws in China, or in Germany, or in parts of Africa, wherever that place might be. And then that means relying on local talent and local skills and local lawyers and probably others as well to make sure that whether it's the way they collect data, where they use data, is done on a local basis in the appropriate legal way.
Yeah, Latin America is the same, and it's keep it simple. First and last name. We get all these, boilerplates, to do CX and implement CRM and whatever it is. And, even though it's global, they don't have that know-how to make it local, and they don't make the investment to make it local based on the regulations and everything, center of excellence, PMO, and so on. And then, there's a gap in there in terms of technology and usage, so I seen that all over Latin America.
But just a quick thing, I want to ask Jesus this question. I'm trying to set up a contractor that works for me who actually lives in Colombia, country of Colombia, and my Bank of America United States app for setting her up only allows first name, last name, and she's got 4 names. and I can't get Bank of America online to figure it out. I'm gonna have to call someone to figure that out. So that's where Bank of America assumes that everyone just has first and last name, when in other parts of the world you've got 3 names, 4 names. So it gets complicated.
Well, Bank of America, I can tell you about my experience. They are not empowered. They don't have the mindset to deal globally. And now you have to use fintech technology just to do that. And that's one example. And that's why right now, you have all these employment of records application just to do that, Bill. So, and that's a big issue, globally. And again, that goes back to, inclusion, biases, and everything. And, when you're putting together a product from the United States, and trying to deploy that, rest of the world, sometimes it's difficult. So, some companies have been successful doing that, like Soho, and there's many other that have a really good fit because they're coming from a different mentality, mindset, and the 80-20 rule doesn't apply anymore. You have to have people that are part of that product, marketing and and owners, to be sure that it's deployed everywhere. And it's not easy to do. It's not easy to do. Go out and change everything. I can tell you the case from Puerto Rico. We have zip codes. But sometimes those zip codes are not really properly set up in many of the companies, and I can tell you the rest of the story. But you need to be sure that you have the right team, the right resources to take care of those issues.
I mean, it's almost like the approach to launching a product that you're going to sell in multi regions, right? What do? You globalize it first, and then you localize it. And it sounds like it's the same sort of approach with CX.
Yeah, for sure. And going back to what Bill said, this is something that's been decades, right? That part of it is not new. It's that's globalization, and then we need to localize wherever we are. But what's new, I guess, is the speed of which everything is changing right now. It's just, it's explosive how quickly things are changing. And so going back to the impact question, Jody and Michael and everyone, I think, there's so many positive impacts. On the positive side, there's just so much going on now, even in predicting, for example, in healthcare with the prediction models, predicting disease, predicting outcomes of chemotherapy. And just so much positive stuff going on. Even with that positive, though, there needs to be still that human decision making, the leadership team. You still need that kind of blend between the technology and the leadership, making some of those decisions. So it's obviously not only the technology that's driving business decisions, but people. And I had another point, and I think it just zipped out of my head. So I'm going to stop, and you guys jump in, and then I might add it after.
That sounds good. I'm just taking a look at the clock here. We have 10 minutes. There's one question I want to make sure I get to before the end, because all of you will have another chance to address. But before I cut anyone off, did anyone else want to weigh in on Michael's last question?
I was just going to add in on one last point. I think it's also having a lot of flexibility in our technology I think that's a key element. While we can design as amazing experiences as we want, there's a lot of limitation on the technology we are using and the integration in the back end that kind of reflects in what the front end users experience. So being able to align a lot with the solution architects and working with the IT very closely to design those experiences will really help.
And I do remember my point. So can I jump in after?
Absolutely.
Yay, it happens, right? But so talking about the impact that it's having. Oh my goodness, did it just go out again? Oh, geez. Is this really live? Okay.
It's the pressure, Michelle.
What the heck? No,
we can come back. We could come back. You just put a pin in that, think about it. We'll come back to you.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay. As we go to kind of wrap up and think about the future of customer experience, right? I'd love to know from each of you, like, what do you see changing in the future? What's going to happen? What's going to happen to customer experience in the future? If you had your glass ball and you had to predict what was going to happen, Tom, I'm looking at you. What's going to happen in the UK?
Oh, so no pressure. I'll just go first. I've got my crystal ball right here. It's actually a paperweight, but it'll do for today.
Oh, but you get a gold star for props. That was awesome.
So there's a couple of things, I guess, and I think one of them we've already covered, which is the role of technology. And I think a lot of that will be defined by, the layer that sits beneath the front end and the governance that allows us to work across different areas, different geographies, respect different requirements, be that data sovereignty or whatever. So all that supporting infrastructure is going to be a significant move forward in my view, and something where we kind of get to that world of a more integrated data vision, I suppose. I guess the second thing would be, and call me old school, I think we spent a lot of time talking about sort of the front-end digital experience and how awesome that is and how slick that is and how connected that is. And then the package gets lost in the post. Or the supply chain breaks somewhere and you didn't have the component to do the thing that you promised your customer that you would do. And I think it's a multi-year, multi-decade process of kind of the front end and all the operational kind of capabilities that fulfill whatever the product or service is coming together, so you don't have a 360-degree view of the customer, you can have a 360-degree view of the product lifecycle or the service lifecycle and how that's ultimately delivered. And I think those companies who crack that are going to do very well out of it. That's my prediction. It could be completely wrong. Take it as you wish.
No, I love it. I love it. Oh, looking at my screen here. Hey, Zeus, what do you predict? What's going to happen?
Well, it's going to be hyper-personalized, automated, intelligent. Isn't that what everybody's selling to you?
Absolutely. And only for $1.99 per person.
Exactly. I think it's going to be a realization because of AI that we need to improve the data. I think I'm going to see a lot of, I think we're going to see a lot of investments in, in customer data platforms in the future, in order to bring what Tom is saying, that governance, and everybody's going to have the different versions of what a CDP is, but company needs to start owning, the data because of privacy reasons, and make sure that you have the right content. You need to define, your audiences and your buyer personas and match that to the right data, right content. And people, are realizing now that, why do I have to wait, for Facebook to give me that data so I can know my customer? So I think that's something that is going to happen. And because of AI, people need to start making those investments. That's the way I see it.
Excellent. Vaishali, what's going on in the Middle East over there next couple months, next couple years?
If I had to say one, I think it would be obviously the holistic approach, but by integrating emotions into the world of CX. We can have as much as data collection and, make sure technology is in place and have the human connection, but the essence of connection and emotions being fed in, like even if you use AI, how do they know you're frustrated versus you're complaining or you're angry or you're sad? being able to take that step forward, I think that would be a game changer in the CX space, because then you know that you're using the right technology and matching it to the right expectations of what the customer is really feeling.
You just brought up another ITHS episode. We're going to do sentiment analysis down the road. Fabian, what do you have over in Europe?
From my perspective, user experience must be more and more user-centered. So you have to think more outside in than inside out. You have to see it from the user's perspective and from the customer's perspective, which is not easy for many European companies, because they have a history and they have an organization that has grown over decades, and it's not easy to change the mindset. This is one thing. And second thing is, customer experience is end to end. There might not be silos anymore, no department borders, no breaches in the process, nothing. It must work end to end perfectly, and this is the future.
You are speaking my language. Let's get rid of those silos like yesterday.
Absolutely.
Georges, what do you see happening in Africa?
Yeah, I think here it will be also about governance. We need to start with the baseline, the governance, how we take decisions. Even US, the CEO of Airbnb or the CEO of Uber get out of his office and go on the field, right? And this is something that you cannot always see, in how some of the government, some of the CEO behaves, especially here. So there is an issue about governance. Are the leaders of these organizations really caring for making customers at the center of their business? And what I've come to understand is that if a leader wants something to be done, that will be done. That will be done, absolutely. So I think this is the challenge here, how to raise the awareness of the leadership of organizations and leaders here in Africa.
Michelle, jump to you for part one of North America, and Bill will round it out with you at the end.
Are you sure you're ready for me?
I'm ready for you.
Holy moly, sorry about that. Anyway, yeah, I think there's, because of the complexity and all this exciting stuff that's coming out, I think it's causing some confusion and even concern among consumers and employees and leaders and organizations and all of that. But the more we integrate the new technologies, all this tons and tons of data that we have, and going back to my original point of showing that impact on business outcomes, showing that connection would be great. And I kind of dream of companies that are going to be even more transparent and possibly even draw more of their customers and their employees into the design of services and solutions and all of that, increasing that collaboration, like Fabian was saying, cutting across the silos, all of that, but being more transparent with what we're doing and bringing people into these solutions. Wouldn't that be nice? Mm-hmm. I think that would be a really cool thing in the future.
No silos and transparency. I mean,
wouldn't that be nice?
That'd be amazing. Bill.
Well, I've been scratching out things that I was going to say because everyone else has been saying them. So let me just add a couple of points maybe to finalize this and get everyone in the audience to think about it. I think one prediction is we're going to see far less need for frontline support because of automation and because companies will realize they've got to fix stuff. Back to Tom's earlier point, you got to fix stuff in the entire product line and product life cycle. But number two, because of that, because customers won't be contacting you as much, you will still have customers that are frustrated, who aren't bothering to contact you anymore. In our new book, we call them silent sufferers. And so it's going to be really imperative to reach out to customers more proactively than in the past to find out, almost like, how you doing? How did this work for you? How's your onboarding? How does this change work for you? How's this new camera that you bought, Michael? How's that going for you? And so that's going to open up a lot of that communication and that connection that I think we all seek as humans. So I think that's going to be a good outcome in the future.
Excellent.
Well, thank you all. This is a really interesting discussion. Frankly, I could just keep going, but I suspect our audience, after an hour and a half, has probably had all about of us they could take. But thank each of you for joining us today. I really, really appreciate it. And like I said, that's all the time we have today. You all survived the hot seat. And if you, audience, think you have what it takes to be in the hot seat, let us know, because we'd love to hear from you. I'd love to get you on the show. Thank you all for being with us this week. I'm Michael Fauscette.
And I'm Jody Spencer. Tune in next time. We're going to have some different faces, different topics, and different perspectives as we put someone else in the hot seat. And for all of you on the line, you just got yourself a repeat invite, because we're going to do one talking when those silos come down and we have transparency. So thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.